Good morning, everybody, and thank you once again for attending one of our webinars. Again, we want to thank the British Valve and Actuator Association for sponsoring this event. I know we have a number of their members on the webinar today. The BVAA is a member organisation who do work for companies in the valve and actuator market in the UK, providing networking opportunities, providing business support services, providing technical advice with standards, and at the moment in these difficult times also helping providing information from government, where to get grants and all those sorts of things from. Today we got a fantastic topic. Would you mind advancing the slides, Matt? So a lot of you will probably remember me from when I was the MD of Zoedale. I'm still involved in Zoedale as a non-exec director, and I'm still have my roots in the British valve industry. The reason I'm doing this presentation is, or reason why I'm asking Matt to do this presentation is I did a session live at one of the BVAA conferences on corporate culture and how the culture and the values we created at Zoedale really was the key to our success. I talked about a lot of the pain that I went through to get that culture right, and a lot of that resonated with Matt. And I hadn't met Matt before, and he and I got talking. We got talking further over a few beers at the dinner, and we then carried on the relationship together. Matt was kind enough to have me on one of his sales change podcasts recently, which was fantastic. So I thought I would return the favour and ask Matt to come and do a webinar. Because whilst I've worked on building corporate culture and values, I've never had to actually manage it remotely. And I think it must be so challenging when you can't see your workers face to face. You can't gauge how people are feeling, how they're reacting. And Matt has been through this and is going through this. So Matt, over to you for your presentation. If I could just add, you will get some polls pop up on the screen at some point. If you could answer the questions. If you have any questions you want to pose to Matt, type them in the chat and I will ask them to Matt at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everybody, and thanks for having me on, Tim. It's a great opportunity. First of all, I've got to apologise for the length of my hair. We're all in this situation together, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there with 8 weeks worth of hair growth. It's the first day in a long time that I've actually styled it. I'm not wearing a hat, just for the benefit of the viewers. So first of all, an introduction about me. Like Tim said, I'm the general manager of SAFI Valves in the UK. I've got commercial responsibility for the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. I'm also the director of Sales Change, which is a sales and business support consultancy service. And I host the Sales Change podcast, which is available on all platforms, iTunes, Google Podcasts. Tim was on episode 8. A bit about my background. I'm the former national sales manager for a company called Goodwater, and former sales leader for Clearwater Technology. I grew the revenue of Goodwater around about 25% over 3 years, switched over to SAFI Valves, and I've been here for about 2 years. We've seen a real step change in how we approach business and how we approach our culture. And for the first time in 6 years, we've returned a significant growth rather than a decline in sales. Tim, something's happened to the screen. There we go.
My apologies, that was me. You should be back.
And so prior to that, I also served in the military for 9 years. I was in the Royal Corps Signals. I left as a corporal, and I was fortunate to carry out tours in Iraq, Canada, and the Falkland Islands. So what we're going to talk about today is corporate culture and maintaining that corporate culture through difficult times. So what I thought I'd do is just run some quick facts and figures for you. And Tim, can you place the first poll whilst we go through these facts and figures?
Yes, that's what I'm just trying to do now, actually. It's the first time that I've used the polls. Just give me 1 second.
So the first question on the poll will be, how often have you heard from your leadership team over this period? And the answers to the poll will be daily, weekly, fortnightly, or who? I just want to get a gauge for how often you've heard from your leadership team, because that will feed into what we're going to talk about throughout this webinar. So just for some facts and figures, 94% of executives and 88% of employees believe a distinct workplace culture is important to business success. And one thing that you've got to realize is companies with strong cultures saw a 4 times increase in revenue growth. This is why it's hugely important to maintain a corporate culture, especially through trying times. 90% of employees at winning company cultures are confident in their company's leadership team. And we'll get onto that shortly. How are we doing with the poll, Tim?
I'm not sure if you can't, to all of the viewers, if you can't see the poll on your screen, I apologize. If you could maybe stick your answer in the chat box. The question was, how often have you heard from your leadership team in the last 8 weeks? Daily, at least once a week, at least once a fortnight, or who? And we're getting some answers in the chat. So apologies if the poll isn't working. That's my fault. So we've had some nice. Can you see the answers coming in there, Matt, as well?
No, how do I see this chat screen, Tim?
If you down the bottom of your down the right hand side of your screen, you should have the word chat. Can you see that? If not, I can read you the answers.
Daily, weekly, at least once a week. Ben Shipham says at least weekly. Donna Maskell, weekly. Clive Johns, weekly, fortnightly. So there's a big mix there. At least nobody said who, which is important. So if we skip on to the next slide, there are a multitude of different sort of corporate culture defining pillars out there. I mean, I just typed in pillars of defining corporate culture on the internet, and I looked at CEO Magazine, HR Zone. This one is actually from customerthink.com. And they all kind of sit around 7 pillars of defining a corporate culture. So the first is the mission, which is what describes the business that you're in and who you serve. The vision is where you want to be in the future. So how your company is going to move from one point to the next. The values, which are massively important, are the fundamental beliefs of your staff. And some of it is unwritten ground rules, such as what's right, wrong, good or bad in corporate practice. Then you've got guiding principles, which are slightly more specific than values. So principles are objective, values are subjective, but they provide direction. Purpose is the reason for being, really. It's your why. And Simon Sinek's book, Why, Start With Why, is a great reference point for that.
I love that book.
It's a very good book. It's a very good book. The legend. So this is all built around the history of the company. The legacy. You had it with, let's take Steve Jobs at Apple, for example. Everyone knows that Steve Jobs worked with Steve Wozniacki in a garage and then built that company. That's the legend of Apple. Jeff Bezos, again, for Amazon, his legend was that he built it from a garage. SAFI, just to give you a bit of background, SAFI started as a washing machine component manufacturer. We manufactured components for washing machines, plastic valves for washing machines. And then slowly but surely, the business has evolved. It's still maintained by the family. Stefan Mozan, our CEO, it was his father who started the company. And so it's still a family company. And yeah, we started from washing machines. And then the behavior sort of encompasses all of the values, the guiding principles, the purpose and the legend, and everything behind how the company actually functions. If you've got any comments or if you want to ask any questions, then please feel free to drop them in the chat. I can now see the chat. So, so I think the 7 pillars are a little bit too wishy-washy, and I like to round it down to just 4 groups. And this is how we define our culture at SAFI UK. So we've got the people, which are at the core of everything. Before we do this, can I just have a poll? Out of these 4, leadership, process, purpose, or people, which would you say is most important in defining a culture? So if you can't see the poll, then just drop it into the chat, whether it's people, purpose, process, leadership. People. Thank you, John. Thank you, Elaine. Oh, people. Yes. I was supposed to ask this question before we came onto this slide, but you can see that people are at the center of the Venn diagram there.
We don't need to be running this webinar, do we, Matt? We've got an audience who know what they're doing already.
So the people I believe are the core, like the foundation of everything that you should be gearing everything around in your company. Then on the outside of that, you've got your purpose. So if we go back to the 7 pillars with the legend and behavior, this is what I condensed down into the people. Once they've bought into the history, once they've bought into the idea of where you're going, that becomes the core people factor. Then we've got the purpose, which encapsulates that. It shouldn't be wishy-washy. It shouldn't be a little bit blowy. It should be communicated with everybody. So the mission, the purpose, and the vision from the 7 pillars of corporate culture should all form part of your purpose. It's where you want to be. It needs to be clear and concise. My team at SAFI know exactly where I want to be in 5 years, and it's in a way that they can easily digest. You've got to remember also that when you're communicating this purpose, people take messages in different ways. So as a leader, you need to be aware that you need to communicate this in a specific way. Encompassing the purpose. So the process is how you achieve the purpose, and it needs to be as smooth and efficient as possible. What you can't have is a sales process which is wishy-washy, has too many roadblocks. And encompassing all of this is the leadership. And the leadership for me has to be, you have to be able to build trust. It has to be clear, and it has to be empathetic. And if you take those 3, trust, clear, and empathetic, especially during COVID-19 times, that's where you as a leader should be stepping up and making sure that they understand what the purpose is, what the process is, and how you're going to get there. So if I skip on to the next slide, which is just to give you a brief overview of the history of SAFI UK, and we'll touch on each of these subjects. So from my perspective, when I joined SAFI UK, we had a disjointed and broken team when I first joined around 2 years ago. We didn't really have staff attending the office, so we've got external sales staff. They didn't really attend the office. There was no need. We had no clear sales direction, so the process wasn't working very well. We had ambiguous pricing model. The sales strategy just wasn't very clear, so the process was breaking down. We had a tunnel vision that we wanted to be a particular thing, but it wasn't agile or flexible enough, and the leadership message was a bit unclear and a bit confusing. So the people also, just to give you a little story, the first Christmas party that I attended for SAFI UK was held at a small pub at the end of our industrial estate. Everybody turned up because it was run at 12 o'clock on a Friday. Nobody did an evening meal. By 3 o'clock on the Friday, everybody had gone home, and that was the Christmas party. We had just a normal roast dinner. There was no going out drinking. There was no socializing afterwards. It was literally attend because you had to attend, and it was run during work hours so that people would attend, and then everybody left. So just to give you an overview of what we did, we took this, and I started at the bottom, and the fundamental principle of people. We change the people, or we change the people, and that's a phrase that I coined from you, Tim, after your appearance on the podcast.
Yep.
We either brought the people into the fold and made them understand our message, made them understand the purpose, or we changed the people. And this goes for root and branch. This goes for existing staff, but also staff that we brought into the business. When we bring people into the business, we do it through behaviors rather than skill sets, and we make sure that the people the people that we're bringing in understand where we want to be and how we're going to get there. I distinctly remember having a conversation with one of our sales administrators when we brought her into the business about, you're my first recruit that I'm bringing into the business. You're at the start of this journey. And that's where the clear messaging from a leadership perspective comes in. We want to be in this place, in this time frame, and you're coming along for this journey. So the people, we also invested in the team. We've invested a lot into training. We've invested a lot into team building. So we now have team events. So we're bringing these people along for the journey. We look after the people because they're our foundation and our building blocks. We also gave them a sense of purpose. So like I said before, I rewrote the business plan for SAFI UK in 2019, and they now understand where I want to get to, where this company is heading. When I joined, it was, we just had a target. That was it for the year. There was no additional sort of forward thinking about where we're going to be in 3 years, where are we going to be in 5 years, how are we going to get there, how is this purpose going to drive our team, and that all builds into the legend. So how SAFI UK was started and how we brought people along for this journey, I gave them the ability to imagine how they're going to fulfill the purpose. So how are they going to fit into that mission? How are they going to fit into that journey? And once you liberate them from doing something and allowing them to do it themselves, they buy into the message. We've also ripped up quite a lot of processes. The sales process was broken, is one word to use. We had 35 separate discount codes for all of our customers. So we've completely rewritten that, and we've only got 4 discount codes now. I don't like the discounting model in itself, but we've got 35 discount. We had 35 discount codes, and now we've got 4. So removing this roadblock and the confusion around massively important. But it doesn't come down to just the sales process. I'm talking the quality process, the operational process, the booking of goods. All of these processes need to be streamlined so that people can spend less time thinking about how to do the job, and they're doing the job rather than, just thinking about it. And then the leadership. I suppose I've got to take credit for this because I am the leader, but I've also allowed other people to be the leader. The leadership, as you can see on the diagram that's on the screen, the leadership caps everything off. The messaging has to be clear. It has to be concise, and it has to be completely transparent. You have to share your thinking in plain sight, is a phrase I like to say. You have to make people aware that what you're saying has true intent. You don't want to deliver a message which hasn't got intent behind it. And it has to be consistent messaging. You can't change your mind from one point to the other. So that's what we did at SAFI UK. And for the first time, like I said before, for the first time in 6 years, we experienced a growth, which was phenomenal for me. So just to bring us back to the purpose of the webinar, what actions have we done throughout the COVID-19 situation? And these are actions that you can take during any difficult times. And I'm talking revenue struggles. I'm talking redundancies, layoffs, that type of scenario, or if your building catches fire. I don't know. So what we did with the people, way before the COVID-19 lockdown started, my team were already worried about their jobs. They were worried about how they were going to get through this period, whether we would lay people off. And this was way before the furlough was announced. They were worried that they were the last person into the company, so they're going to be the first person out. We went through struggles previously. So the history of SAFI UK is around about during the economic crisis of 2012, there was some redundancies at SAFI UK. So the production team, which was where the main part of the redundancies were, became worried because they thought that this crisis would lead to further redundancies. So as a leader, the messaging was clear and concise. It had true intent, and I spelled it out clearly to them. For the next 2 to 3 months, you have a job. We're not going to make anybody redundant. I also gave them timeframes to say when we were going to review this process. So we're going to review this. So, for example, when the lockdown ends, when Boris Johnson announced that we can go out, but we can't go out, you have to go to work, but you can't go to work if you haven't got. So once that announcement was made on the Sunday night, within the hour, I had communicated with my team what we were going to do. I just told them that I'm going to review the 50-page document that the government are going to release. Once we've reviewed that document, then we'll make a decision on whether we're going to return to work. Once I'd reviewed that document, it was clear that we're not going to return to work until there was some clearer messaging from the government, and I communicated that with the team. This all seems very, very simple, but it's just clear and concise messaging. We've also had to adapt our processes. So the process that we use in the office and the technology that we use in order to complete those processes has had to be adapted. Now, luckily 2 months before the COVID-19 situation, we installed a VoIP phone system, and the first 2 weeks of the lockdown were trying, to say the least, because we initially began rotating staff. So we had one member of the sales team in, and then the next day another member of the sales team. that quickly became apparent that it wasn't feasible to do because the workload was just going to be on one person. So we had to shift. And as a leader, you have to remain agile and flexible enough in order to make that shift quickly but effectively, but also communicating that shift to the rest of the team. Everybody needs to be bought into why you're doing something, and this is the purpose we'll come on to shortly. But the process has changed. So we immediately switched, as I'm sure lots of people have done, we immediately switched to Zoom. I now have a paid subscription to Zoom, and that's something that we'd never considered before. I think we just WhatsApped or FaceTimed. We've also brought everybody into a common WhatsApp group. So all of the internal staff, the external staff, I've got a United States sales manager, they're all brought into the one WhatsApp group. So everybody has that communication. And for the first couple of weeks, it was fun because everyone was sharing lockdown memes. And but it's gradually become a sense of we're all in this together. And as a leader for myself, over the last couple of weeks, it's become more of a drag. It's become more trying. It's very difficult to G up your team, to instill that motivation, instill that momentum to go forwards. But when you share that with your team and you understand, and you're sharing your thinking in plain sight, that phrase again, people understand and people start to shift again. So they're shifting the momentum again to a different direction. And over the last couple of days, I can't count the amount of Zoom calls that I've had rather than regular telephone calls. And this is just to see people and gauge their body language. So we've also shifted the purpose. What I didn't want everybody to do was become fixated on our business plan, which we set in October last year for 2020. So I presented the business plan to our executive board in October of last year.
I think we're losing you there, Matt. Can you hear us? Don't know if Matt's lost his internet connection. Just bear with me, everybody. I shall see what's happening.
I'm still here, Tim. I can see you.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Matt, and your picture's just disappeared from the screen. Do you want to try logging out and back into it again? You went very crackly and then just disappeared. We still got the listeners here, so we don't. I'll leave you to it. Okay. Sorry about this, everybody. I think Matt had an unstable internet connection. He could hear me talking, but we obviously couldn't hear him. He's going to try to relog back into the studio and take over the presentation. If anyone's got any questions they want to ask Matt, stick them in the chat box, and we'll ask Matt later on. So,
am I back?
You are. You need to put your slides on the screen now.
Ah, yes, I do. Oh, wrong button. Let's go. Apologies for that. The signal is notoriously bad in our building, but it's the best signal I've got. Are those slides on the screen, Tim?
They are now. Yeah. So do you want to stick them where you are and then carry on? So, and apologies for the delay, everyone.
Yes, I can't remember where I was. Can you remember where I was, Tim?
You were talking about how basically you were communicating with everybody in SAFI globally, talking about how hard people have had it, what people are finding difficult, rather than just broadcasting it. And you finished about talking about your company's purpose and goals, and that wasn't the only thing you were talking about, I think.
Yes. So the only thing so to go back to the purpose, we've had to shift the purpose over the last couple of months to get from point A to point B, which is looking at September, October as an interim goal rather than rather than the final year number. I think company leaders can become quite fixated on the idea of achieving a certain number rather than just getting through the period or getting through a particular crisis. What we've also done is I've given my team a lot of trust, which has been repaid, I think. Once you give your team members trust and that sense of responsibility that they are responsible for their output, they are responsible for their areas, they are responsible for their clients, that's allowed them to take on a form of leadership. But I've also been empathetic through this period as well. Not everybody in my team at some point has questioned whether they're going to have a job at the end of this period. Everybody in my team has questioned what's going to happen when if the numbers don't pick up. What's going to happen if there's a lot of what ifs, and I've tried to be possible and clear and as open as possible. I've had some difficult conversations with my CEO to say,
I think we've lost Matt again. Oh dear. Let me text him again. This is not going too well for him. We will distribute the slides to everybody after this, so you can have a look at the slides and the recording as well. Matt seems to be back.
Hello. Yeah, so what I've done is I've allowed the team to think for themselves. That's the point I was trying to get to. But what we've also got to look at is the future. How are we going to return to work? So I've communicated to the team that we won't make a decision before June the 1st. They know that they can't. They're under no pressure to return to work. There is no pressure at SAFI UK anyway. I'm not asking people to come in and risk their health and well-being. We've also got to look at the markets. How's the market going to respond? And again, all of this is encompassed with transparency, empathy, all of those buzzwords, but it's just being open and sharing our thinking in plain sight. My team speak to me and say, this is what I'm struggling with. And I speak to them and say, this is what I'm struggling with. It's also important to define where the next purpose is going to come from. So as a leader, I'm constantly looking at what's the next 6 months going to look like? Where are we going to go next year? How is that going to get to how are we going to get to this point in 2021? We've also got to learn from this process. So what's gone right, what's gone wrong? Clearly, my internet connection is not good enough for a webinar. So we've got to learn about this process as well. But the unique situation that we've gone through now, just in case there is a second spike, how are we going to react? How are we going to immediately change our VoIP system to being remote? How are we going to immediately change our Zoom conferences? And we speak twice weekly, a Tuesday and a Thursday, and we have each member of the team run a different Zoom call, so that everybody's not on the same. I don't have to run all of the Zoom calls. It's shared responsibility, and mainly this period has allowed us to understand everybody's nuances better. It's allowed us to get to. I know now that my team. Some members of my team don't like short emails. Some members of my team like short emails. All of this, which you probably wouldn't pick up in a standard situation, all of this it's a learning process, and that's what we should be looking at. We should be looking at it with a positive spin. We shouldn't become fixated on the idea that we have to move forward constantly. There shouldn't be a constant forward motion through this or any crisis. We should just have permission to be able to step back, figure out a path together, and share our thinking in plain sight, and then build that trust. When you understand how your people are going to back you through this period, and how your team are going to stick with you, like I'm stuck with them, this is an analogy from the army, I suppose. And I was watching Who Dares Wins the other night, where they're all linking arms and they're diving into the sea. When they fall backwards into that sea, no one wants to be the weak link, but they're all fighting in there for each other. And that's what we've done at SAFI. We've sort of closed ranks. We've brought everybody in, but we're also allowing that to fester out into our wider community and to our clients, so that they can understand where we want to be, how we want to get there. This communication isn't just internal. This communication is external as well. So one of our first actions when the lockdown was announced was, as a global group, we recorded a short video which said, "We are open," in many different languages. I think we had Spanish, German, French, obviously, the English. We had our I can't remember the language, but we had 4 or 5 different languages on this video, which we posted on our social media channels to say that we are open, and this was so that our clients were able to realize that we are still here to support them. But it's about that clear and concise messaging. We're going to release some more videos over the next couple of weeks just to say, this is how we're coping with this. This is how we're coping with this. Sharing our thinking in plain sight to everybody allows you to move through a crisis. And that's what I'd suggest to maintain a corporate culture. Initially, to build that corporate culture, you need to do those 4 things, you need to address those 4 areas: the people, the process, the purpose, and then the leadership team. If one of those fails, you're going to have a breakdown in corporate culture. So if you address those 4 pillars, but then guide everything with trust, empathy, and clear, concise leadership, you're going to be able to move through this period and any period.
Could I ask a question at this point, Matt?
Go for it, Tim.
Now, as you've said, the people and the team are the backbone of any corporate culture. There's many people in many businesses who are working really, really hard, struggling to work from home with children around them.
Yeah.
Some of their colleagues might be having an easy life. They might be on furlough. Their bosses might be topping their furlough pay up to 100%. They might still live with mum and dad. Is there going to be resentment between team members when everyone comes back to work? And we did mention this on the last call with Charlotte, as to who's had it worse, you or me. And is there going to be any issues between teams? And if there are, how would you handle those?
I think it's about it goes back to the communication. When you communicate that we've had to furlough 1 member of staff, and ironically, it's the cleaner.
Okay.
So she's not going to have had it easier because she's been furloughed, and the team that have remained at work are not going to have had it easier. I think it's around the messaging. When it's how you communicate your purpose. When let me put this into an easier way to say it. I'll speak in plain English rather than trying to waffle. If you're clear and concise from the moment you start, and the people understand where your business is heading, what costs and overheads you have to take into consideration, what your revenue needs to generate, how you need to get from point A to point B. If you then make people aware that this is a necessary action to get from point A to point B, everybody is built into your purpose and your why. When you're taking people on that journey, it shouldn't be about who's had it worse and who's had it better. I think I'm in the office now, and that's mainly because I want to keep away from 3 children who are being homeschooled. So some people would say I've got it easy being in an office. I know people that are quite happy to sit at home and do webinars and conferences, and I've got no issue with. I mean, I've spoken to my team and they've been on Zoom, and we've spoken about ping pong tournaments and all this type of stuff that have to go on. Life has to go on. So to address your point, how would I address a fracture within a team because somebody's had it better? Clear and concise messaging, and make sure people are aware that this action needed to happen in order for us to maintain momentum, maintain the business, and keep the team going.
Yeah. I have also heard of companies who set up separate WhatsApp groups for those who are on furlough, because technically when you're on furlough, you can't work. So they set up a separate WhatsApp group just so they can keep them updated and keep them in the picture, so they don't feel isolated for 8-9 weeks and come back into everything. So that's well answered, Matt. So I'll leave you to crack on now. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I've pretty much finished, Tim. I was just about to put up this final slide, which gives a bit more information about me and where I've come from. But I'd love to take some questions from the audience. if they want to put some questions into the chat. I'd love to hear what their thoughts are, whether we should have done anything differently, whether we've what their teams have done. I'd love to bounce off of what the audience are thinking.
Just one more question while waiting for people to type their questions is, I probably know the answer to it, but is the current pandemic and situation, is it going to change the way you guys work, or are you going to go back to the way you were working before?
I think we'll go back to the way we were working before.
Okay.
There will be some social distancing measures that need to be put in place, but listen, they're just inconveniences. I'm really looking forward to having the team and being able to. We've run an update on our computer system over the last couple of weeks, and from the 1st of May, we've encountered issue after issue. Having to deal with these issues remotely is proving really difficult, which is why we're sat on Zoom calls for so long, because then we can share screens, we can show people where things are going wrong and how to fix them.
Whose idea was it to do an IT upgrade where everyone's working remotely?
It was planned before this. This has gone back down to how we updated our pricing. We needed to do a system update in order to update our pricing. So going through all of that during this period was probably not the best thing, but we needed to update our prices. So it just had to happen. But I'm just looking forward to being able to resolve problems and having conversations with people without having to sit on a screen.
Yeah. Okay. We've got fantastic questions coming here. External sales is different because we don't know when we can go out and visit customers unless they invite you in. How would you address that situation? That is a very good point, John.
John is one of my team, and
okay.
Yeah, I know John. Listen, the external sales people are struggling more than most at the moment because they are the ones that are stuck at home. I know, for example, John spends most of his time out on the road. He's worked for SAFI for 35 years.
Wow. Okay.
He spends 3 to 4 days a week out on the road, and I know it's becoming a struggle just staying at home because it's completely alien to his routine. He's eager to get back and visit customers, but I think this is a factor that's outside of his control, and having to go back to work but not being able to work in your normal pattern is going to be a struggle for John, and I'm sure for lots of other people. I don't think there will be a return to customer visits as we know them for quite some time. Probably We're talking 2021. So it's a way that we can get around that. We're going to have to step up the Zoom calls with clients. We're going to have to step up telephone calls, potentially meetings away from their premises, meetings away from your premises in a field with some scarecrows. I don't know. We're just going to have to find a workaround.
I think clients are more open to it because, I mean, everyone's got used to it. And if someone called me now for a sales call, and normally I would say, oh yeah, let's go down to London. I'll meet you for a beer or a coffee, which would mean train to London, tube train, all that sort of thing. Whereas now I'd be quite happy to do it on Zoom, and then I'm spending half an hour of my life rather than half a day of my life to probably get the same result. And I think a lot of people will realize that. So I think a lot of buyers will be more open to sales calls by Zoom in the short term.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a step change for business across any industry. The ability to run these meetings remotely has changed. It's changed for me because I'm able to do podcasts over Zoom now. I was meeting everybody in a studio, but I've had guests from the United States. I'll be able to have client meetings with our team in the United States remotely rather than having to fly into Chicago, then hop on another plane down to Florida. It's going to change business wholesale, I think. People. Can I just ask the audience, what have they struggled with most over this period? What have they struggled with in terms of client visits or internally in their company? We'll wait again for some answers. The thing that I've struggled with most, just so that everyone's aware, is the lack of human contact, the lack of being able to bounce off somebody's body language, the lack of office banter, Rob. That seeing real infectious laughter and being able to network with people and being able to invite people into your space to say, this is what we do, managing childcare and full-time jobs. That's killer. It's an absolute killer, and that's why I'm in the office 4 days a week. John again, freedom, not being able to meet my customers and stuff, and Clive. All of these, they're frustrations. They're holding back business, and that's it's. Yeah, like John not being able to visit customers from Ben. All of these are frustrations that people are feeling. But from a corporate culture perspective, your team should know these. Definitely childcare during work days, training new staff members through screen share. Yeah. That's a killer. That is a killer. Yeah. We've I must admit, in order to speed up our training process, we've used this time to look at our training program in the UK, which was non-existent is probably the word I'd use. We've used this time to look at the training program, lay out which training programs we want, how we want to run them. We've run some tests on webinars. Like I said, I've got the paid subscription to Zoom, and I've got the webinar package. So we've run some sales training through webinars, but it's so difficult for people to ask questions because unless you're asked a question on a chat.
What I can resonate.
Go on, Tim.
Yeah, I can resonate with all of those sort of struggles there. I mean, the thing I've found the hardest is lack of adult male conversation. Living with a wife and two daughters, it's and the only male in the family was our dog, and unfortunately he was put down a couple of days ago because he was so old. So now I really am on my own.
My condolences, Tim. Ultimately, corporate culture comes down to building the trust, and that's building the trust through your entire team. If they trust the leadership team and what they're saying is true and accurate, and this goes to any sales leaders on there, if what you're telling your team is true, accurate, and you're being you're gaining that commitment from your team because you're being honest, it goes a long way to building a team. It goes a long way to building that culture around your company, and it goes a long way to improving performance. If we go back to those facts and figures, companies with better performing cultures have 4 times revenue growth. It's all of these facts and figures are taken from big conglomerates like Forbes and Moneythinker and Glassdoor and those types. So they're wide-ranging studies. So you've got to leverage that. You've got to leverage that to build your company's growth.
Yeah, and I think also nowadays companies are a lot more sort of ethical and diligent about who they do business with. And they want to do business with people who treat their companies well. And companies like Timpson, for example, he's been in the news recently. The guy who owns Timpson's. First of all, he employs ex-offenders, gives them a chance. They furloughed a load of their staff, but he's been topping up their pay, so he's been getting good publicity. Branson, on the other hand, has had some quite negative publicity. You know, he's sitting isolating on his own island with several billion in the bank and not paying his staff. So it really does. It really does sort of reflect how companies would do business with you, the way you treat your staff. So that's brilliant. Matt, have you got any more to add?
Hidden weapon in recruitment as well. If you can show that you've got an inclusive and cohesive culture, it's a lot easier to recruit better staff. Yeah.
People want to work for you. Yeah, I totally agree.
No, I've got nothing else, Tim. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. That's been fascinating, and apologies for the technical glitches there. And again, my own personal development, I need to learn how to work these bloody polls in my webinar software. I could see them on the screen, but they just weren't popping up. Thanks everybody for joining. We're doing another webinar next week, which is on how to repurpose your online content. And again, you'll probably receive an email about that. So Matt, thank you very much. Thank you to the BVAA for sponsoring it, and thank you to everyone else for giving up your time to join us today.